Why is nobody playing these champions even though they're kind of crazy broken if played properly? First up, let's start with Caitlyn. She is absolutely powerful when it comes to laning and dominating during the laning phase. She has superior range, which allows her to always auto-attack an enemy champion when they try to go for a last hit. Not only this, her first ability scaling and damage potential is absolutely absurd during the laning phase and even in the later stages of the game. So every Caitlyn player must really be oppressive during the laning phase and play super aggressive. If you don't do this, you lose out on your champion's power and just doom yourself into irrelevancy. However, there are a few things that you need to know when it comes to playing Caitlyn, especially when you want to be efficient. Number one is placing your traps properly behind the or next to the enemy tower. You don't want to just place them down for the sake of placing them, you want to maneuver the enemy into a certain direction. For example, placing it next to the tower on the wall side, the enemy can now no longer pass through this area. If you do this while the enemy is in front of the tower, then they'll have to walk around and then exposing themselves to more auto attacks from you, making sure that you deal even more damage to them. If they're behind the tower, they can't really access the wave anymore because they have to lean towards the left side of the tower now. The next thing I see many Caitlyn players do absolutely horrendously wrong is scaling their third ability second. You don't want to do this, and this is the reason. Your second ability's recharge rate and the amount of traps you can lay down increases with ranks, therefore making it the best skill to max second on your champion. Especially when we want to talk about objective control, overall maneuvering, or just making sure the enemy has only certain ways to go into, and overall your own safety against certain champions. At objectives, you can completely wall off an entrance with your traps, and whenever somebody walks in, you'll deal a massive amount of damage to them with the bonus range from your headshot and your first ability being guaranteed to hit. Another thing that's very important is, for example, playing against certain assassins or champions that need to walk into you. Let's imagine you're playing into a Zed. A Zed will always appear behind you with a shadow when he ultimates. Therefore, placing the trap behind you will immediately lock him down and allow you to go for some space. Then he'll be rooted instantly and you'll get to deal damage to him. And things get really easy from that point onwards. Another thing that's very important is when you're, for example, facing melee champions. What is one certain characteristic or thing all melee champions have to do to deal damage to you? To get in your range. And this is something you can completely deny with your traps. Every enemy will always take the fastest route into your face to deal damage to you in the fastest manner. They'll not walk zigzag, they'll not walk in circles, they'll just walk straight to you. However, if you can place down traps that will steer them from that path, and make them take longer to get to you, you can increase your distance to them while also dealing damage to them as you're weaving auto attacks as you walk backwards. Another thing most people don't even utilize is her ultimate ability. You might believe it's quite a nice damage tool to execute somebody, but it's also a great tool to get somebody killed that is trying to get your teammates killed, especially when they're having stealth abilities. For example, let's take Akali and Kha'Zix. Akali can turn invisible with her Shroud, and Kha'Zix can turn invisible with his ultimate. However, Caitlyn can use her ultimate ability to reveal them and then let her teammates kill them. This is something that many people don't use, so use it with care and make sure to get these people killed. Another champion who has been kind of flying under the radar is Urgot. Not too long ago, this champion received a massive buff on the on-hit conversion of his second ability, making Manamune a very powerful item on this champion. Combining it with Kraken Slayer and Manamune, his on-hit damage is quite brutal and he wins lane more often than he doesn't, simply for the fact that he's ranged, has a very strong early game and scales decently okay into the later stages of the game, however features one critical weakness. He is super short range and requires to get really hands-on in order to get anything done, which in most of the games is more of a burden than a blessing. However, there's one thing that makes him very powerful, because he can call out one target with his ultimate ability and instantly lower their HP bar by a certain amount and then execute them on top. Which means if the Urgot ults a target, this target will be substantially less tanky than you believe it might be, and then he can use this ultimate to make a proactive play by flashing into the enemy team and fearing all of them. And this is basically his signature play. But let's briefly talk about his laning phase. On level 1, he can skill his third ability and really dance with the enemy champions. If they ever try to get too close to him, he can just dash towards them, flip them over and run them down, because he has the damage for this. This becomes even more powerful as the laning phase goes on, as he has more tools to use and put the enemies behind. Don't forget, laning phases are very heavily impacted by how you play level 1, level 2 and level 3 and only get reset as you go back from base or get a gank from your jungler. As a consequence, Urgot can really heavily snowball through the early game and establish a lead in this laning phase and then take over the game from this point onwards, because it heavily depends on the enemy knowing what to do against the Urgot and not the Urgot doing anything special. But there's one thing that would make this champion so much stronger than it currently is, and it would be making Death Stance apply its melee benefits to him rather than the ranged benefits. If this happened, then this champion would be a lot tankier and playing him would be substantially easier in teamfight scenarios, because as of now, he really needs to itemize into tanky or bruiser items as the game goes on, for example even a gauntlet, because otherwise he would just end up dying within a flash, which is the biggest issue as I've already said before. But now we move over to one of my favorite champions in the game, and it's Veigar. Many people completely underestimate the power of this champion simply because they play him wrong. There are a few things you have to consider when you play this champion, and once you do this champion will turn into an absolute broken machine of getting you LP. So let's tackle the skills first. Many Veigar players commit to the grave mistake of not maxing their cage ability the second. But Kirks, why would you want an ability that doesn't do any damage? Okay, your champion is very immobile and very weak and very susceptible of people jumping you. So what about an ability that completely controls the fight and space you play in and immediately kills anyone that walks into it or gets too close? So you're reducing the cooldown on it, making it even more powerful because you have it available more often, and therefore enabling you and your team to play in a completely different manner. How about that one? And which class or which type of champions really suffer playing into this cage? It's probably low-range champions such as Lucian, Vayne, and even Kai'Sa that really struggle into doing anything into a Veigar the moment the cage is placed down. This also applies to every melee champion that doesn't have a massive gap closer that can just teleport you behind the target. So when should you pick the Veigar? Every single time you see that your matchups are already locked in and they are short-ranged and melee champions in any type of way or bruisers, you can just lock in the Veigar and enjoy your free LP. However, Veigar really sucks, like he absolutely blows into high-range artillery champions. They just kill you. However, champions like Ahri, Akali, Kai'Sa, Lucian, Vayne, all of the bruiser champions, even Garen, even Ornn, all of these champions have big trouble into doing anything into Veigar because Veigar completely stops what they're supposed to do. Even if Ornn hits your entire team with an ultimate, the Veigar can place down the cage in the way of the entirety of Ornn's team to then completely deny the follow-up, and then the Veigar team can safely disengage. And another thing that makes Veigar really powerful is his ability to clear minion waves. His second ability scales brutally with AP and your skill points in it don't really matter. However, your first ability is a different story. You really want points in there, so you max it first, then you max your third ability first, and then your second ability. However, you obviously want 1 point in your second ability to have it available. But every single time you kill a minion with your first or second ability, or every single time you hit an enemy champion with any of your abilities, you'll gain AP, and if you kill them, you'll gain even more AP. To put this into perspective, gaining 25 AP is basically getting an amplifying tomb for free. All you have to do is last hit 25 minions, or hit an enemy champion 25 times. Now if you take a closer look as to how games progress and how many minions you lasted through the game and how many times you hit enemy champions, you get quite the interesting amount of AP values. And now comes the real magic, Rabadon's Death Cap. It amplifies all your AP, even from your passive. And to make it even more beautiful, you can invest into a full resolve first tree and be super tanky and even have overgrowth, making you even tankier and then infinitely scaling to the later stages of the game. You will one-shot waves, you will one-shot objectives, you will one-shot everything that walks in your way, and only time is something that you require, at least a tiny bit of time. But there's one thing that you need to know about Veigar. From levels 1 to 4, you're kinda weak and can't really do too much on your own. You can trade, you can farm, and be completely content with it. However, on level 5, the tables completely flip over. Many people will not realize this as they're playing against you and still try to be super aggressive right into your face. They'll walk up, try and trade with you, but there's only one thing you have to do as a response. If you hit your full combo on the enemy and they don't have bone plating or resolve as their first tree, you'll completely kill them with just all your spells at the same time, because now you have access to your ultimate ability, which is quite the heavy execute ability. And in the hyper late game, you can even throw out your ultimate ability straight into somebody's face when they have 100% HP as long as you have first strike available. Then you'll take away 70% of the HP bar without doing anything else and I can't play anymore, but that's just a more of a for fun thing. Somebody that's going to deny all your fun is Garen. This champion simply doesn't die, is one of the safest picks ever and is overly annoying for any AD carry player or typical assassin players the moment they get silenced. Once again, Garen has fallen through the radar for whatever reason. This champion is perceived as boring because, well, he's just a tank, he runs at you, he doesn't really die, and he most likely kills you with Ignite, his first ability, and his ultimate. But I think that is the biggest problem. Garen is simply perceived as boring and therefore not really played. So let's talk about the strength and weaknesses of a Garen. Garen's laning phase is quite decent if he knows what to do. Auto-tech resetting his first ability and making sure to use his third and second ability properly is basically the key to Garen. But how do you do this? First off, again about the skill order. You only put 1 point into your first ability, max your third ability the fastest, and then the second ability. The benefits from your second ability completely outvalue any other bonus from your first ability in any world at any time, and the damage mitigation and duration is just so much more powerful than the pitiful damage gain you have from skilling your first ability more often. But how does this translate into laning? Your second ability needs to be used in a way where you expect the enemy to deal damage to you, to then use it properly. For example, a Renekton. The moment a Renekton dashes to you with his first ability and gets too close, you can already use your second ability in expectation of him doing something. Then, as your second ability is about to run out, you can cast your first ability to silence him, for him to be then unable to do anything to you, because he can just stand there and auto-attack you. And whatever happens to you, be it stunned, knocked away or whatever, you'll still cast your third ability and deal damage to people or minions around you. But now let's talk about the most important part of the Garen lane, the level 5 power spike. So, you know that Garen's trading pattern is very simple. You have your alt attack, your first ability, your third ability, and use your second ability for damage mitigation. But what changes the moment the enemy hits 50% HP? Well, you might believe they have half of their life left, so they aren't dead yet, right? But that's wrong. They are actually dead on your screen, and it's only up to you to kill them. And how do you do this? The moment they walk up to you, you get too close to them, you drop your Ignite, your first ability, so they can't do anything about like flashing away, because they're silenced, and then just drop your ultimate ability straight onto the head. Good job, you just killed them. The ultimate scales with the missing health of the enemy champion, you have Ignite, and all this is true damage, so how can they possibly survive? They can't, and most people still don't know about this. They're just chilling back doing nothing and not even getting a lead for free. So please, I beg of you, do what I told you instead. You will win so many more games for absolutely free. And the last champion on this list is the Bomberman Ziggs. This champion has been underrated in the solo queue for so long, and I still don't understand why. It's simply because of people being like, why are you playing a mage in the dragon lane? That's not an AD carry, why are you doing this? Well, it's just people being stupid. Ziggs is a very powerful pick that scales into the later stages of the game, completely denies enemies' ability to take objectives, defends the base, clears minions, is just obnoxious to deal with, and can even clear sideways with his ultimate from literally Narnia. Next is he's pathetically easy to play and utilize, and you don't really have to know anything to make this pick work. Just make sure to keep your distance and throw bombs at the edge of your screen and you'll be doing absolutely fine. If you want to walk the extra mile, place down your minefield in a corridor where the enemy has to approach you from, and then throw your ultimate right into them as they're getting slowed running through those mines. But what exactly are the most powerful spikes in the early game for Ziggs? With the introduction of Boots of Mana, Ziggs finally has an item that's super cheap, which is a major power spike and helps him out quite a lot when it comes to mana issues and early damage. After this, his most powerful early game spike is Luden's Echo. Simply hitting an enemy with a spell at max range and having enemy people around him will deal damage to them for the Luden's proc. It's free damage. And not only is it free damage, it's also absurd damage. Just take a look at the damage scaling of Ziggs' first ability. Luden's Echo will roughly add another third of that spell's damage straight on top for absolutely free. To make sure you have it more often, all you have to do is just run around, wiggle around, take a look at your environment and make sure you're safe. And with that done, life is absurdly easy for you. There's not much for you to look out for, just enemies jumping ahead, and as long as you have your second ability, you'll be completely fine. And before I forget to mention it, your champion is absolutely busted with Herald, and with how strong Herald is in solo queue or generally, you'll absolutely have a field day with this champion, taking down towers with your satchel charge for absolutely free and getting even more gold to hyperscale. And if it wasn't already strong enough, you also have First Strike to deal even more damage. What a lovely champion. And that's it for today's video. Thank you all for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, leave a like and subscribe to the channel and come back for more RiftGuides content.